Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehall. For the last couple of nights, we've been talking about the Declaration of Independence, deconstructing it, trying to, well, basically figure out what our founding fathers were talking about 200 years ago. These are men and women who were very highly educated, much more educated than you and I are today. And it really gets down to 100 years ago, our masters decided that people in the United States shouldn't be educated. The United States did not need thinkers or dreamers or doers or workers who could think for themselves. They also didn't need people who could read or write. What the United States of America, Inc. needed was assets, parts of a machine that were interchangeable. They'd simply do a job that any part of the machine could do, and when they didn't do their job, they were discarded like garbage. It's the science of human resources. Human resources is simply a way of keeping track of your assets. And once you discover, excuse me, once you discover that everything in the United States is based on words and symbols, and unless you understand those words, unless you understand their real meaning, unless you understand the symbols that go with those words, you're helpless. You're speaking a language that no one else speaks. That was very glaringly clear to me when I was lured to New Zealand and was there for 3 years. They speak what would, at first glance, appear to be English, but after 3 years, you discover it's not actually English. It's actually their own unique language, where the words have totally different meanings to what you and I would think. And it's the same with our masters. They speak a language that sounds like English but isn't. The master's use of language has a lot of hidden meanings. And unless you understand those hidden meanings, you're doomed. That's why we are where we are today. Really good place to learn about words and symbols and their meanings is jordanmaxwell.com. Mr. Jordan Maxwell's been doing this for at least since the 60s, I think. Brilliant man. jordanmaxwell.com. JORDONMAXWELL.com. jordanmaxwell.com. Website's kind of hard to figure out, but you know it's worth the effort. And also go to rense.com, RENSE.com. Jordan Maxwell's been interviewed on that show a lot. Words and their meanings. Very important. So what we're doing now is you and I, we're chatting about deconstructing the Declaration of Independence. And so this is part 4. Let's see if we can see how far we get tonight. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. It continues. He, George III, King of England at the time, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. Basically, the colonies are objecting to the fact that King George in England, 200 years ago, was making it virtually impossible for foreigners, the right kind of foreigners, people that were intelligent, hard-working, industrious, people you'd want to be your neighbors, was making it virtually impossible for them to move to the United States. Basically, he was also refusing to allow other people, good people, hardworking, decent people, good folk, again, people you would be proud to have as neighbors, wasn't allowing them to go to the States at all. Basically, the United States was where you dumped the dregs of the earth. It was a prison colony, just as Australia was a prison colony. The king was also making it very difficult to buy land. The king did not want you to buy land. He wanted you to work the lands that he owned and his friends owned. Today, we see this in massive foreclosures in the United States. As far as our masters are concerned, too many people own their own home. But if you own your own home, you have some sort of security. If you have security, you have independence of thought. This cannot be tolerated. This is why today foreclosures on real estate continue in the United States. It's a massive business. And again, it's no longer about money. This is about power. They want our masters. They want us to be homeless. They want us in the streets, living in our cars if we're lucky, living in tents if we're not. They want us to be afraid. And the best way to destroy people's foundation, their center, is to throw them out of their own home, have them lose everything in the world they possess, everything they cherish, everything they treasure. That's the best way to destroy people's souls. It happened to me in New Zealand. There's actually a company in California, we've chatted about this before. This company only has one goal. When your house is foreclosed upon, they go in and they bulldoze it down. There's no attempt to resell your house. There's no attempt to go into your house and collect the assets, your coin collection, your stamp collection, your clothes, your toaster, anything. There's no attempt at all to try to make any money on the foreclosure of your home. All our masters want is your home leveled and all of your dreams destroyed. That's what they want, as King George III 200 years ago wanted. He wanted us all to be homeless and wandering. He wanted us literally to be cattle in a field. And if you own nothing, you have nothing left, you can be driven off your land, sent anywhere our masters want us to be sent. And that's what's happening today. The Declaration of Independence goes on. He, George III, has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. Well, 200 years ago, King George III, you and I know King George IV, which was old George Bush, and you and I both know King George V, which is little George Bush, the psychopathic, drunken, homosexual, deviant monster in the White House who actually had gay call boys stay at the White House overnight more times than even can be imagined. We are ruled by England, basically. So 200 years ago, George III would not allow judges to sit in judgment in our courts on us unless they were his judges, unless the judges in the court were not impartial. They had to administer the justice, the laws that George III wanted, the king in England. And if they did not, the judges, follow the laws that the king in England laid down, they were not judges. Or if somehow they managed to become judges, the length of their duration as a judge, or the amount of money they made, got less and less and less. The same thing happens today. You'll note that we're still suffering, even if we could get rid of Obama, even if we could get rid of the Senate and the House of Representatives, the Congress. We still have the judiciary, the judges. And these judges, these sycophants, these psychopaths, have been appointed for life by creatures like old George Bush, Bill Clinton, little George Bush. And unless we get rid of them, unless we address them as well, question them, citizens' arrest of them, no violence. Do not give our masters violence. That's what they want. Under the constitutional republic that was the United States of America, we as citizens have the right to do a citizen's arrest. We have the right to carry weapons, to bear arms in defense of ourselves and our country, our families, our neighbors, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We need to arrest the judges. We need to put them on trial. We need to look at their bank accounts and wonder why they have hundreds of millions of dollars of our money in their bank accounts. And then try them under the Constitution. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. The Declaration of Independence continues. He, George III, 200 years ago, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. 200 years ago, George III was creating all of these new government offices that were worthless and useless and criminal in content, and staffing them with the worst kind of people, who he knew for a fact would simply harass us, steal everything we had under his laws, and basically to destroy us. Today we call that the IRS, the Federal Reserve Bank, Homeland Security, the TSA, anything that will empower the masters and their servants and destroy us. As we've chatted about before, our masters are not creative folk. There's been a few bright ones, but as a rule, they just keep doing the same things over and over and over again, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. The people who were in charge 200 years ago, their families are still in charge. Nothing has changed. As I say, there's a lot of work for us to do. He, again, George III, he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power. Very simply, 200 years ago, George III, the King of England at the time, had armies, foreign armies, on American soil. Today, we have the U.S. military filled with foreigners, people who are not U.S. citizens, people who have no respect for us or for our laws or for our country, mostly because these people want revenge. They want revenge for what was done to them in their country, what was done to them in their family's time, their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, atrocities committed by Americans in other countries under the orders of the corporations, our masters. Now these same people are in the United States serving in the U.S. military, foreigners serving in the U.S. military for a promise of U.S. citizenship. They're here right now. We've run out of Americans to kill in the armies. We've run out of U.S. citizens to send off to wars in strange and bizarre places that have nothing to do with us, murdering people that have done us no harm. And we're simply not dying fast enough for our masters. George III, 200 years ago, was separating the military from the civilian government. He wanted the military to answerable to him and only to him. Today, we have old George Bush, George IV, was declaring wars all over the world. Under the Constitution of the United States, the president does not have the power to make war. That belongs to the Senate, to the Congress, to the House of Representatives. The president does not, under the Constitution, have the right to command the armies to go to war. Elected officials of the 51 states have to agree that war is necessary. George IV, old George Bush, Magog, broke the law. And every president since has broken that same law. The military now answers to the President of the United States. In this case, the finger puppet, Obama, has declared war on Libya, on Pakistan, continues the wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and they want to nuke Iran. Why? Hate, power, madness. That's a long story. As I say, our masters are not creative folk. They're not bright. They're not brilliant. But they've never made a pot of coffee. They've never cooked an egg. They're parasites. Without you and I, they would literally starve to death in a kitchen filled with food. They literally could not feed themselves without you and me. So why are we letting them do this? I don't know. Thousands of years ago, there was a very advanced civilization in Ireland. And from them we got the Brehon Laws. And from the Brehon Laws we got fairness, we got justice, the concepts of those things. And you and I have failed completely to live up to the expectations, the hopes of the people who created the United States, our mothers and our fathers. We failed them completely. Because we're lazy, we're stupid. That's why I left the United States. And I note the farther away I get from English-speaking countries, the more normal people are. The more sane, the more rational, the more human people become. There's something about the English language that our masters just cling to, again, like parasites. But thousands of years ago, there was a very advanced civilization in Ireland. And they gave us laws. It's too bad we don't actually appreciate those laws and do so very little. It takes so very little to stand up for yourself. It takes so very little. You don't even have to say no. All you have to do is make the conscious decision as a human being, as a man, as a woman, and make the conscious decision to turn your back and to walk away from these monsters. And they'll simply starve to death. Leave them alone. Leave them alone with each other. That ancient prayer, that ancient hope for a very good friend or a beloved stranger, I'll give to you. May you live as long as you wish. May you love as long as you live. For the2012fad.com, this is Charlie Bluehawk. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel finding his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race, their black magic, captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.